My name is Trisha, and I'm 22 years old, and I live in Canada, and I've been here my entire life. I was born and raised in Toronto. I was a student at Ryerson for a little bit, and then I transferred to York. So now I'm here. While I was at Ryerson, though, I spent quite a bit of time downtown where the campus is, and because the price of food was a little bit more expensive around the area, like in Eaton Center, for example. I ended up in Chinatown a lot because the food was much cheaper. And I also had a good friend whose family owned a convenience store there. So I ended up in the area quite a bit. Kind of a lot to take in because there were streetcars everywhere, and especially during the summertime, large crowds of people. And the U of T campus is just north of there as well. The first time I went to my friend's family store, that was also quite a lot to take in as well. It, for starters, it wasn't like other convenient shops per se. It was like the basement of a convenience store, so you had to walk down the stairs, and you get down here, and it just stretched on. So it was so big. And it was around Chinese New Year, so they had a whole bunch of like the red lanterns hanging from the ceiling, and it was decorated, and it was kind of a culture shock. It was a bit of a culture shock. I remember going there, or maybe 5 years ago even, and like the streets were filled with people, and you had shops with fruit markets opened out on the sidewalks and stuff like that, and now it's not as crowded anymore, and you know the colors there that I remember aren't as intense. And it's definitely changed a bit, and I feel like that has to do a little bit with like the society in Toronto. Not saying that there's anything wrong with it or that there's anything right with it, but just it's definitely been watered down a bit compared to what it was a few years ago. Um, I was also filming. The one and only time I've ever filmed in Chinatown was a documentary with a friend who's like the content of the documentary actually focused on Asian stereotypes that she had to deal with because she was Vietnamese, and she chose Chinatown to film in because she felt like she was so heavily like she was so heavily stereotyped as a Chinese woman, even though she wasn't. And she kind of used Chinatown as a background to emphasize just how much she was like kind of just how much the Asian community, I guess, was just like squished into one as opposed to being separate, which they are.